what people need to realize is this thing called relative intensity. It's not absolute. It's not how much weight did you lift versus how much weight did somebody else lift. It's not how fast did you run the mile versus how fast did somebody else run the mile. It's not even how fast did you run the mile today versus how fast did you run the mile last year, which a lot of people in their master's category are trying to hold on to.
Yep.
What it means is relative to you today, are you working at the right intensity? What's intense for my grandmother is not going to be what's intense for me, which is not going to be what's intense for Catherine David's daughter. If we all try to work out at somebody else's intensity level, the results go down.
We are here because we know the outcomes in our lives are within our control. That taking absolute ownership of how we eat, sleep, train, think, and connect with each other is how we'll optimize our health and happiness. That chasing excellence is how we grab hold of what is possible. Our mission is to live on the run, always chasing, never stopping. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Chasing Excellence. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Pat.
Good. Today we are going to finalize our breakdown of the 5 factors of health. So we have done episodes on each one of the 5 factors, and we'll get into what the 5 factors are in case somebody is new. And this is the last one. This is going to be the 10 principles of training, right?
Cool.
So as we always do on these conversations, let's start with just a quick 1-minute recap of what the 5 factors are and why we've paid as much attention to them as we have.
Yeah, so it's the 5 factors of health. So these are the 5 things that are essentially within your control. You can kind of manipulate to improve your health. And what we've talked about before is if you go to the doctor is probably going to hit on 2 of those things if they're a good doctor, right? The bad doctor goes, take this medication, see you in 6 to 8 weeks. The good doctor goes, okay, you could probably improve some things if you started exercising and ate better, right? Now that's usually where they send you off, and they don't give you any sort of any sort of prescription for that. But
or if they do, it's like go for a jog and
exercise. So move more, get a Fitbit. They usually get a Fitbit and don't eat as much fat.
Right.
I wish that they would do more, right?
Yeah.
So we've created these 5 factors, and the 5 factors are. They are those first 2. So it is what you eat and how you move or your training, which we're going to talk about today. The next is, which doctors don't talk about, this massively impacts your health. So here's a cool story. I had one of our members come into me that's really struggling with Lyme disease. And she's really awesome person to work with because she's so into getting better. Everything I talked about it, she understands, right? We talk about gut microbiome and she's like, check. Like she's, everything is kind of dialed in to the nth degree. And she's read this article that was essentially about the issue that people that suffer with this is all of a sudden they get these massive hits, and all of a sudden out of nowhere they have this huge fatigue factor, and all of a sudden they have no energy, and they're like, man, what is that? So she read this article that had everything to do with your heart rate. So what she's trying to do is dial in her heart rate to see if that will, during exercise and training, to see if she doesn't train with a class, she trains on her own because it's so dialed in, to see if that is the factor that will change it up. And this article was really convincing. I was like, had a conversation. I was like, I like it, but we have to recognize that heart rate is one of so many variables.
Yeah.
What about if it is something that you're eating that's causing this? What if it has to do with your sleep? What if it's just a stress factor of, you have a lot of stuff at work coming at you? What if it's a relationship thing? Like you have a fight with your husband. And so while training is important, it can't live on an island by itself. You have to take all these variables together to see how you're manipulating your health. So what they are, and the thing that I talked to her about was, let's track, and she's so dialed. It's awesome, the data we're going to get us. Let's track your eating. Let's track your training. Let's track your sleep. Let's track your connection or relationships. And let's track your thinking or your stress levels as well. So we've been doing this for a little bit, and
it's just to track and then be able to correlate with you had a
good day, a bad day. Exactly.
Yep.
Because before it was random. It seems so random. And what she's seen is the number one correlate so far, correlate, not causality, because we don't know it yet. We don't have data. She thought it was all about training. She's like, if I do 4 days of training a week, that's what causes it. And what we're finding is right now, the number one thing is And then she was like, okay, if it's not that, then it's got to be sleep. Like the days I don't sleep. So all these hypotheses, right? And the biggest one that's it's sugar. Whenever she has any sugar, it seems to really set her off for the next day.
You know, it's interesting. Tim Ferriss had Lyme disease. This was a few years back. And he actually said that the thing that helped him the most, and I'm pretty sure he said this, was being in ketosis.
So there you go. No sugar, like zero sugar, right? Like that's amazing. Zero carb, 20 to 70 grams of carbs minimum, depending on how sensitive you are. Yeah. So yeah, that's by far and away the number one thing.
Interesting.
So long of route to get to, but that's the reason why all these things matter. You can't have one without the other. You know, you could be working out really hard, but if you are also super stressed at work and you're not recovering, or you have bad things going on at the home, like all these things kind of play together. You can't have one of these things get you to super healthy without any of the others. So there's our 5 factors.
Right. Awesome. So before we dive into this conversation about principles of training, what do we mean, or what do you mean when we say training, at least in this context? Like what, like it feels important that we at least narrow the conversation to a degree so that these principles kind of make sense.
Sure. So we're training for health. That's what so this is the 5 factors of health. So training, aka exercise, for the benefit of improving your health. So what that means is we're not trying to make it to the NFL. We're not trying to do a bodybuilding competition, and we're not trying to do an Ironman or anything in between those things or anything else. We're training to try to kick ass when you're 90 years old. That's what we're looking for. So all of these things can have carryover, and some will have more carryover than others if we're looking to go into some sport-specific or agenda-specific protocol. But if we're training for overall health, longevity, wellness, like the thing that the doctors want you to do, these are the 10 principles that are most important to be focusing on for overall health.
And would you say that that's across the board from as it relates to maybe age? You know,
so our definition of health is work capacity across broad time and modal domains across your lifetime. So what that means is, break that down. Work capacity, your ability to produce energy, right? Your ability to move and produce power across broad time. So whether that's like for a second or two, something like a 1-rep deadlift, or long, like running a marathon or hiking a mountain. So we want to be able to do anything. And modal domains, which also means like a variety of tasks. So shoveling snow, lifting weights, running, swimming. We want you to be able to do all those things when you're 18, when you're 38, when you're 58, when you're 78, and when you're 98. And the more you hold on to that capacity across your life, that's the true measure of health. Now, what the medical community has done is they try to pull correlates to this, predictors of work capacity across broad time modal domains. So what they'll say is, if your cholesterol is high, we're predicting that in a few years, you're going to lose capacity. Cholesterol does nothing to affect your life. It's a number. They're just trying to predict things. Fasting glucose is a really good predictor that in a few years, if it's high, you're going to probably get some sort of like chronic disease and have to be on medication. And you're not going to have the same work power. So what we want to do is take the actual thing and measure that as the indicator, the number one key performance indicator for how we're doing, not these things that are leading indicators, predictive and correlate. Even if they're causality, we want the actual thing. We want the number one thing, which is your work. How much work can you do?
Right. Got it. Okay. So we've got our 10 principles of training. We are going to dive into them. The first one is work out 5 to 6 times a week.
So this is essentially, if you want anything, you have to do it frequently. You know, it's excellence is what you repeatedly do. There's so many different mantras we can pull from, and smart people have said smart things about this. But basically, it comes down to, if you want something, you have to do it consistently. It's not about what you do every now and then. If you want health, you need to, I know what the doctors have said. It's like 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week. I've seen it in action. We used to do at the gym. We used to have a 3 times a week membership. Right. Yeah. We used to have a twice a week membership. We used to have a once a week membership. We used to have drop-ins. All of those are gone. We no longer do any of those options at the gym anymore. The reason being is I can't guarantee you that you're going to improve your health if you're only coming here 2 or 3 times a week, because I've seen it. Some people do it and some people don't. On the flip side, if you're here 5 or 6 days a week, I feel really good about where you're going to be in 2 or 3 years.
Right.
It's about consistency. This isn't just health. This is anything. If you want to learn to play guitar and you do it once a week for 20 minutes, even 3 times a week for 20 minutes, how long is it going to be before you actually feel like you've mastered the guitar?
Right.
It'll never happen.
Yeah.
You will never master the guitar 20 minutes, 3 times a week.
Yep.
But if you just start with 5 or 6 times a week and forget about how many minutes it is, you're going to start to get there, because it's a consistency thing. You need to get the little touch and little touch and little touch, and that's what builds over time. The other thing is, the hardest part about working out is just starting, is walking through the door. It's putting on your running shoes. It's walking out your door for a run. It's whatever it might be. That's the hardest part. We're going to build the habit, and the habit doesn't come from 2 or 3 times a week. Now, that habit doesn't need to be go do a full CrossFit class. I've been talking about this with Heather a lot, because she's starting this practice of meditation. And what she's found the best thing is, a lot of people say like Headspace is great because it's only 10 minutes. 10 minutes is too much. Like, do 1 minute, do 30 seconds, take 3 deep breaths, anything. I started a practice of cold showers. I haven't missed a
Welcome to the club.
You too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't missed a cold shower. So this is recent. I haven't missed a cold shower probably in 3 weeks or so, right? So, but man, that was so daunting for me before, because I was like, until I said, all I have to do is turn it cold for 1 second. And if I do 1 second, that's okay. And if I turn it off and turn it warm after that, that's okay. And that's how I can build the habit. But what ends up happening every single time, and it's the only way I can get to turn it, is like, I'll do it for 1 second. I turn it cold, and then for 1 second is not that bad. 2 seconds is that bad. And I've never, ever done it for just 1 second.
Yeah.
The least I've ever done it is for about 5 seconds, because Heather's like, I haven't done cold yet. She's like, we got to go. We're leaving now. Out of the shower. Like, we were late for something. I was like, okay, cold. 1, 2, and turn it off.
Yep. And
but I got
victory.
It in. I did it. Victory.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's about setting the habit.
Really cool. A mutual friend, Dave Asario, I only know this because he just posted this, but he's very close to 1,000 straight days of cold showers.
Love
which
it.
is just impressive.
1,000 days of showers is impressive. My daughter Maya would that would be a lifetime goal.
The other thing is, you reminded me of something that it's an analogy that Simon Sinek gives, which is toothbrushing as it relates to kind of this thing, which is like, you can't go to the dentist once and have good oral hygiene,
right?
You
no
have to
how
brush
intense,
exactly.
No matter how good that
100%.
is, no matter
you need to brush for 2 minutes twice a day.
Yes.
The intensity is not the
correct.
The win, where you win.
Showing up.
Exactly.
It's doing it.
Love it. Okay, number 2, focus on mechanics, consistency, then intensity.
Okay, so 3 different things. We'll talk about all 3 of these things. We just talked about the consistency.
Yep.
That is, you just got to do it. But once you're there, what I want people to focus on is the mechanics. Don't worry about how much weight you're lifting. Don't worry about what your time is. Don't worry about running super hard or any of those things. Just focus on the mechanics. The way you're going to be able to do this for a long time is if you're trying to, I don't want to say geek out about it, but pay attention to doing it well, right? Let's pull it back to the guitar scenario, right? If you want to just get there and wail on some power chords and turn the volume up to 11, it's like you're not gonna get to where you want to be. Instead, if you sit there and really try to think about for a little bit, doing it better.
Yeah.
So it's about mechanics is another word for technique, right? Focus on the technique, whether it's, I'm not talking about CrossFit now, and I'm talking about exercise.
Yep.
So whether you're working on, a squat snatch or a muscle up, CrossFit, or you're working on a bench press or a lat pull down, try and do it better. Better is not more weight or faster or beating your body. Better is better movements. Focus on that. So it goes better movement, technique, then we'll build in the consistency play as well. And then we'll talk about intensity in a little bit.
Yeah. It's interesting. It strikes me that much of the challenge of CrossFit specifically, talking about CrossFit, getting people to consider CrossFit, is that everybody weights themselves towards the intensity, and that's what they make the decision on. Whereas it's the mechanics and the consistency and
totally.
I think that if things went off the rail, it was because things pointed towards the intensity instead of the mechanics.
It's the sexy part though, right? Yeah. And it's the fun part. It's the part that so not only that, it's literally, you don't get, it's built into you biologically.
Yep.
You don't get feel goods from working on mechanics or consistency. You do get feel goods from the intensity.
Yeah.
Literally, there is a chemical reaction in your body called endorphins that are there to make you feel good, to mask physical pain. That's the only reason they exist. It's the only reason you have it, is that when you're running away from danger, or you're running towards the gazelle that you're going to kill for a meal, you can go longer because you feel good. It's the runner's high. You don't get that from the other stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah. Damn it.
Yeah, right?
Next one, prioritize functional movements.
Okay, so functional movements, functional movements kind of become ubiquitous.
Yeah.
So it's kind of lost all meaning because the shake weight and Bosu balls are now functional training. So we have to define what functionality is. And functional movements move a large load, a large distance quickly. So as much as I love bicep curls, they're not as functional, large load, large distance quickly, as a pull-up. Both work your bicep. One, you're using a 30-pound dumbbell, the bicep curl. The other, you're lifting your body weight, 150 to 200 pounds. So there's a lot more load. The other one is the long distance. The bicep curl, you're moving that thing maybe 18, 24 inches, 2 feet. Whereas the pull-up, you're moving that thing the full length of your arm. It could not really get that much bigger unless you turn it into a muscle-up, okay? So it's a much larger distance. Then quickly, what's the idea behind a bicep curl? Slow it down, feel the burn, time under tension. Slow eccentrics, bro. That's what builds mass. I'm not debating that. It does. But for health, for improving your work capacity, what we want to do is move even a little bit quicker. I.e., let's try to get these things done a little bit faster. And that's large load, large distance over quickly is mass over mass times distance divided by time equals power. So you're increasing your power as you do these things. Functional movements produce higher power than isometric movements. Now, if that was kind of like, what the hell is he talking about? Functional movements show up in real life. They're on the job site and they're on the athletic fields. And because of that, those two things replicate the other stuff we do in real life. So on the job site, people pick up cinder blocks. They put them on the shoulder. They walk them around. They have to squat down. They have to lunge, jump, run, lift, press, pull. Those are all things on the athletic fields. People push, they pull, they squat, they lunge, they jump. That's what replicates real life. So if it only exists in the gym, aka like calf raises, pec deck, preacher curls, those are not as functional as the other counterparts to it: squat, lunge, jump, press, pull, and so on. So if you're thinking about what movements you should do, just say, like, does this movement represent something we would see in real life? And if it does, chances are it's a functional movement. And what we want to be doing in the gym is training for health. What health is we're not trying to get better at the gym. We're trying to get better at the gym to transfer outside the walls of the gym so you can be kicking ass in your 90s.
Yeah. Do you think movements like just snatching and muscle ups, and I could probably think of a couple more, are they, like, where do they in your mind fall as it relates to functional movements versus things that only exist in the gym? Like I can see where those things kind of exist as functional.
There's a lot of different defining factors for functional movements. One is that I listed a couple of them. One is that they show up in real life. Which means basically they're universal motor recruitment patterns. That's a fancy word for saying that, right? Which is they show up everywhere. They're in real life, they're on the job site, and so they're in sports and so on. Other ones are that they're essential. if you lose the capacity to do these things, you lose the capacity to live your life normally. If you can no longer squat, well, guess what? You can't get off the toilet. You need to go to a nursing home. People don't go to the nursing home because they're sick. People go to the nursing home because they lose the capacity to perform functional movements. They can't get off the toilet. They can't reach the peanut butter up in the shelf. They can't walk up and down stairs and so on. That's the reason for assisted living, not that you're sick. You go to this hospital when you're sick. So universal motor recruitment patterns, they're essential. The other one is that they're natural. Just like a dog wags its tail and a bird flaps its wings, human beings lunge, run, jump, pull, push, and so on. But the number one, if you threw away all those things, the number one that we're going to hold on to is that they produce power. Large load, large distance quickly. So if you think of it in terms of that, okay, that, like a snatch, might be the number one power producing movement. Nothing in the world creates more high power velocity than a snatch. Now, okay, cool. Let's think about it otherwise. What about like the way that they work through like the 10 components of fitness? Strength, stamina, endurance, flexibility, balance, power, agility, accuracy, coordination, all those things. Well, the snatch kind of hits on a lot of those things. So snatch covers a lot of stuff. And then you think about like, okay, but does it show up in real life? Well, not with the barbell and not through maybe that smooth range of motion, but like, bro, like help me get my canoe up on the top of my car. And you pick it up and you have to get down into full squat over your head to pick it up and bring it over. We just snatched it. Okay. So, okay, there's no squat. You just bring it up in one movement, 3, 1, 2, 3, and up and overhead. You just snatched the canoe, one end of the canoe and your buddy did the other end. So it does show up. That is very, very much a real life movement for a number of different reasons. Muscle up, large load, large distance quickly, for sure. In real life, you get locked out of your house and you need to hoist yourself up onto your deck. Like you have to be able to do a muscle up from a pull to a support to a push. You go whitewater rafting and you fall out of the raft. You got to get in the raft and no one else is in the raft because everyone else fell out. Well, you got to pull yourself up onto the raft and push yourself up and over. Now that you're on the raft, you're the one with the most functional work capacity. Now you can pull everyone else in. So these things do show up in real life for sure. It's just that there's more technique in the gym for sure. You have to get the bar to hit your pockets and, make sure you don't have a quarter extremity violation. You have to keep everything in the frontal plane. And like, there's a lot more things that we focus on, but the more you focus on that, one of the things that's really unique to our program is the attention to technique. Well, that's really cool because the more accuracy, agility, balance, and coordination you pull into it, the more real life you get, and it transfers over to not only the soccer field, the tennis court, or the golf course, it also translates to real life as well.
Next one, live in couplets and triplets.
Okay, so what a couplet is essentially 2 movements that you do back to back. A triplet is 3 movements that you do in a row. Back in the gym day, it was supersets or giant sets, and I'm not against those at all. Let's call them whatever you want. So we could say live in couplets or triplets or live in supersets or giant sets. What this allows you to do is to continue working. So your metabolic engine is still going. You're still breathing heavy, but you kind of change the demands on the body. So let's use a gym scenario, not a CrossFit scenario. Instead of going to the gym and doing 3 sets of 10 of lunges, and then after that doing 3 sets of 10 of push-ups, do instead 3 rounds of 10 lunges and 10 push-ups. And now you have these 2 movements going back and forth each other. Your legs get a break while your upper body works. Cool for a bunch of different reasons. One is that you start to work this neuroendocrine system, this hormonal response where you're out of breath working muscles. That's kind of where the sweet spot happens. But it also allows you to kind of produce higher power. And it's really kind of like the place that you get the most benefit from your workouts. It may or may not, and I'm saying it may, produce bigger muscles. So you actually could. This is where supersets came in. A lot of times they do it with contrast. So you do bicep curls and tricep pushdowns, bicep curls and tricep pushdowns. What we're saying is let's combine some of this. This is where Fran started, right? Let's do thrusters and pull-ups. So you have this lower body dominant movement mediated by the hip, followed immediately by an upper body movement mediated by the shoulder. Your heart rate is jacked at 180, but guess what you can still do?
Yep.
The next movement.
Yep.
And allows you this incredible kind of like stamina play while you're building strength and muscle.
When you say live in couplets and triplets, just out of curiosity, like what is that in programming here for CFNE? Like how many times a week do you deviate from that?
So here's great question. If we're going to talk about working out 5 or 6 days a week, we would like to see the majority of those, so 3 or 4, be couplets or triplets. Fran, Diane, Elizabeth, those are couplets. And then
I wonder if all the girls.
No, they're not. Then Jackie,
okay.
Cindy, there's other ones that are triplets. Yeah. And then what you want to do from there is every now and then do some back squats and then a 2K row. Yep. Like go to the track and then do some bench press. Like that's okay. Do that once a week. Mm-hmm. And then one other week, let's do like a chipper type thing where you just you do filthy 50, where you just do a movement and you're done. Do a movement and you're done. Now here's the deal. I get it. Everyone likes chippers better. Everyone likes workouts with 4 movements better. Everyone likes workouts with 5 movements better. Couplets and triplets are not as fun. Well, just because they're not as fun doesn't mean they're not as effective. They're actually more effective. What people do when they program is they're like, I get it. Like, yeah, let's do some sort of takeoff of Fran. We'll do thrusters and pull-ups. And people are like, oh, you know what else would be sick is if we ran 400 between. People are like, oh yeah, you know what else is if we did burpees. Yeah, you know what else would be great? It's like, yeah, you're making it more fun. I totally get that. There's a time and a place. Every time you add in a movement past a triplet, you are making it less effective. Mm-hmm. Not saying don't do it,
but just be aware.
Be the majority.
Next one, understand relative intensity.
Yeah. So intensity is the independent. Intensity is nice, right? Because it's what CrossFit, as we said, it's the kind of thing that makes you feel good. It's kind of like a shortcut to results. Like if you sit down and practice, and you work hard, you're going to get results a little bit quicker than if you kind of just go through the motions. Enough said. What people need to realize is this thing called relative intensity. It's not absolute. It's not how much weight did you lift versus how much weight did somebody else lift. It's not how fast did you run the mile versus how fast did somebody else run the mile. It's not even how fast did you run the mile today versus how fast did you run the mile last year, which a lot of people in their master's category are trying to hold on to. Yep. What it means is relative to you today, are you working at the right intensity? What's intense for my grandmother is not going to be what's intense for me, which is not going to be what's intense for Katrin David's daughter. If we all try to work out at somebody else's intensity level, the results go down. Kind of obvious, right? If I go for a run for a mile with my mom, I'm not going to get the same benefit my mom is getting. Mm-hmm. And if I go for a run with Katrin, like she's not getting the same benefit that I am. Similar, if I try to keep up with Katrin, that's not the way to do it either because it's not sustainable. Every day you walk into the gym, all you have to do is work out hard enough. Mm-hmm. The saying is, mechanics, consistency, relative intensity. It's not maximal intensity. It's never, ever, ever been. Greg Glassman has said, if you try to do CrossFit every single day as hard as you can, you will not survive it. Yeah. Not that you die, it's just that it won't be sustainable. You won't be around doing this in 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. What you need to do is today, what's the right amount of work I should be putting this today for me? Mm-hmm. You kind of always ask yourself that question. You're probably training at relative intensity.
Got it. Next one, aim for a low trajectory toward a distant horizon.
So this is not for our games athletes. They're not going to follow this mantra. Yep. Games athletes have to be maximizing their results by the open or a sanctional event or the games. They're trying to get as good as they can get at a set period of time. It's kind of like they're playing the finite game. Yep. What we're playing is the infinite game, which means there is no arbitrary deadline. You don't need to be as fit as you has ever been in January or at the games. Mm-hmm. Instead, we're going to take a really low trajectory towards a really distant horizon, meaning let's try to be fitter in 10 years than you are today, knowing that in a year, it's okay if we're not there.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is what's really cool we have masters athletes that have been with us for 15 years that are still PRing, which is phenomenal. That's terrific. Now, isn't that such a better road than like getting super, super, super fit in 3 years, in 3 months, but then being really kind of like off the rails and overweight and chronic disease or broken or unmotivated in 10 years.
Yeah.
We're just going to like, again, kind of like, what's the right amount of work we should be doing today to know that we're just trying to get a little dose, knowing that we're going to come back tomorrow and do it again. And we're going to do it again. It blends kind of a few of these factors that we've been doing together. We don't need to train like a competitor. A little bit of patience and take the long road.
What would you say would be a possible symptom or reasoning for like what everybody I think thinks is like a natural thing to happen, which is at some point like you're not going to be able to deadlift as much as you did 3 years ago, but you're saying that's not necessarily the case, right? So what might be a reasoning for you're starting to see, I'm thinking about when you get to a certain age where you start to see some of those numbers decrease. Like, is that a symptom of overtraining at some point? Is that, I'm just curious, like,
it depends.
If you can identify it, maybe you can start to.
Yeah, it depends on at what age you're starting to see this.
Yeah.
So if you start seeing declining numbers and you're 24 years old, something is going on.
Right.
And it's one of a host of different factors of all the, you can't say one thing.
Right.
It's one of the 5 factors. Now, if you identify like, okay, it might be my training. Well, are you overtrained or you undertrained? You figure out that. If you're undertrained, okay, we need to be more consistent or we need to work with higher intensity. We need to show up more. We need to like, what is it? If you're overtrained, okay, we need to back off. Is it intensity, volume, duration, recovery? What do we need to kind of adjust to those factors? So if you're not seeing results at 25, you're trying to figure that thing out and play that game. It doesn't really change if you're 75, but there's like this thing that we have to work with, which is called reality, which is like at a certain age, we start to decay.
Yeah.
It's just like it is. And everyone's like, you can't go like, here's one of the principles of life. Embrace harsh realities. At a certain age, you start dying. No one in their 90s is beating anyone in their 20s at any athletic endeavor. Like you're getting one step closer to death. Like start accepting it. And once you accept it, now you're set up for success. And realize that it's okay. It's okay to not be deadlifting what you were in your 30s when you are in your 80s. Like that's okay. Now, having said that, Big Bry, first client I ever had, started with him when I was when he was 40 years old. The birthday present for his 40th birthday. He is now, but I think he's almost 60. He PR'd his deadlift like 2 months ago. So it still happens.
Yeah. Awesome. Identify weaknesses, then attack them.
Okay, so you are only as strong as your weakest link. Now, this is what's different if you're going to try and train to be in the NFL. This might not be as relevant if you're going to, this is in business. Like I would not tell someone in business to attack their weaknesses. I would double down on your strengths. Same thing with the NFL. Like if you're fast, like stay fast, dude. Right. Like if you're strong, stay strong, dude. If you work on your weaknesses, now you become mediocre at both things, you're out of the league. But for health, this is when it does matter. For health, let's say you come to the gym and you can run a 5-minute mile, but you can't deadlift 95 pounds. You continuing to go out and run your 20 to 30 miles a week is not going to make you any healthier. You potentially backing off of that 5-minute mile and actually sliding to like a 5:45 or even a 6-minute mile to build up the capacity to where you can now deadlift 200, 300, 360 pounds. That is a more well-rounded athlete that has bigger work capacity across broad time mole domains. Identify what is the weakest link you have as, call it as an athlete if you want to, but what is holding you back in life? So if you, similar, it's like maybe we take a different scope. You're strong as an ox, but your body fat is in the 30%. Like that's a limiting factor for you. Decrease your body fat, even if it means your deadlift, your back squat coming down, and your health will improve. Identify the limiting factor, your weakest link, work on that, and overall, you'll be better off for longevity, health, and in your 90s.
How do you square that with like a class or a CrossFit gym environment where most people are doing things that aren't targeting a specific, like your weakness or my weakness, because we're going to go in and we're going to do whatever's on the whiteboard today. How do you square those two things? Like how does CrossFit, a CrossFit gym, how does CrossFit programming do that when it's not tailored to an individual?
The constant variance does. You don't need to do it. You're always going to be seeing different things. So by default, you're not going to be running 20 or 30. If you're following, as your question is, if you're doing CrossFit, if you're doing CrossFit 5 to 6 days a week, an affiliate, you're showing up, you're doing it. How do I then kind of work on? You don't need to, because you're going to get to run. You're just not going to run your 20, 30 miles a week. And you're also going to get to work on kicking up into a handstand and deadlifting and your squat strength and other things. By default, these things are going to balance themselves out. Now, if you're doing this in your garage, or you're doing it on your own, you could then further it and actually like double down on your weaknesses and speed up the whole progression as it is. Allow yourself to fall back on that strength, that PR, that world class, in order to become more well-rounded.
I didn't do this on purpose, but the next one is constant variance.
Perfect. There you go. So variance, what we mean by that is constantly changing things up. And one of the reasons is just that. You want to be mixing things up. If you just, now here's the deal, is like, I'm not saying you need to handstand push-ups, muscle ups, and squat snatch your body weight. That's not what variance is. But what it means is don't fall into the trap of doing the same thing over and over again. Just think of it that way. Just don't keep doing the same thing. You don't need to go to the crazy fringes. You don't need to flip tires. You don't need to, go for a 1 mile walk with a water jug on your head. Right. You don't need to kind of get all the crazy things. Just don't do the same thing over and over again. Now, if you want to take that a little bit to the next level. So if you're on vacation, and you swam and ran one day, well, then go to the gym the next day, like that type of stuff. And if you want to kind of play with this a little bit, like if you're kind of a gym monkey, a gym rat, like just kind of learn to play a new sport every now and then. Like try water skiing, try kite surfing, try pick up basketball, like go to a field and kick the ball with your soccer ball with your kids, like whatever it might be. Like get out and do other stuff, hike mountains, do yoga, like expand your horizons a little bit.
Target your threshold.
Okay, so threshold training is when you work at or around your maximal sustainable pace. So this is down the list a little bit, but after we kind of do all these other things, what we'd like for people to do, and this relates a little bit to relative intensity, but what we want to do is all the good stuff kind of happens at your threshold. So whether that's learning to type or it's trying to get in better shape. If you're learning to type and you're completely in your comfort zone, and let's say you walk to you start a typing practice, you want to get better typing, and you can currently type 50 words a minute. Well, if you, when you're practicing, are only typing 20 words a minute, you're not going to get any better by that practice. You don't get any better. Similar is if you can type 50 words a minute and you just kind of jump to and you're going to try to type 120 words a minute. You're not going to get any better from that practice. One, there's no mistakes and you're perfect and it's way too slow. The other one, you're making way too many mistakes and it's just chaos. One is completely in your comfort zone. The other is in the panic zone. We do the best learning when we're stretching ourselves. Just a little bit uncomfortable, but we're getting the right dosage. That's kind of like the real world example to talk about, kind of what's happening inside our bodies in terms of like your VO2 max, your muscular stamina, and your ability to shuttle lactic away from muscles. So the way to think about this is if you're doing a workout, and let's call it running a mile around a track. And your current PR is 6 minutes. Well, if you start that run and you're going to try to do it at a 12-minute pace, you're not going to get that much benefit from that workout. You can run it in 6. You're going to run it in 12. It's so in your comfort zone, you're not going to get that much out of it. Okay, the flip side of that is you can run it in 6. You're going to try and run it in 4. You're going to blow up at about the 600 meter mark. You're probably not gonna finish. You're not gonna get that much fitter from that training session either. But if you kind of work that around that 6 to 630 range, 645, now we're training at or around your lactic threshold. Now we're kind of really talking about the good stuff. It's where technique and intensity are perfectly at odds. It's when you're not in your comfort zone, you're not in panic zone, you're kind of right there. So if you, at the end of a workout, worked so hard that you're blacking out, seeing stars in a puddle of your own fluids, and you're like, I am never doing that again, you probably went too hard. You don't need to do that. Similar, if you get done and you're like, you haven't even taken a deep breath yet, you were conversational the whole time, you're reading a magazine on the recumbent bike, you probably,
or while you're running around the track,
you probably didn't do it, right? Yeah. It's like, we want to find that sweet spot.
Have you ever read the book Flow by the author? I'll never pronounce it correctly, but it's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
You actually like went deep on the H there.
Yeah.
Mihaly.
Yes, I got it there. But anyways, what he said, so he was kind of the father of flow research. Like he was the first one to really dive into it. And a lot of people have worked off of his work. But the thing that he said that I really loved was that to find flow, you've got to find the border between anxiety and boredom, because that's everything that you're talking about as it relates to threshold. So just that struck me. I hadn't thought about that for a while, but like that, just that visual of the anxiety and the boredom, like one foot on each of those is you know you're in the right place, and that'll lead you into a flow state. Whether
it's flow, the zone, deep practice, all these things. There's so many different things that will benefit by spending time at or around your threshold.
The last one we've got today of 10 principles of training is enjoy it, the opportunity, the moment, and the process.
This doesn't need to be a stressful thing. Like it doesn't need to be stressful. Like just go and try and make it as enjoyable as you possibly can. So for this reason, I always, when I was training for Ironman, it's so monotonous and it's so boring. So for that reason, I allowed myself every available opportunity to make it more fun. So I would actually take road trips to train in cool areas. So I would take a road trip to and I don't mean road trip like 3 days. Right. I would drive into Boston, 35 minutes away, to do my long runs along the Charles.
Nice. Yep.
Right. Like, so everyone else is doing, as opposed to like, I'm running through my neighborhood again. Right.
Yeah.
Like for the gazillionth time I'm doing this.
Yep.
Or I would drive up to Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, and I would do a bike in the mountains. And
so you're your own version of constant variance.
Well, it's because it was more fun for me. Like, find a buddy. I would train with buddies. Like, if you're stressed out by the clock or the score, like, dude, don't score it. Like, don't look at the clock. Like, make this enjoyable. This can be a fun part of the process. Now, I'm not saying like the Ben and Jerry's thing, like if it's not fun, don't do it. Like, if this isn't fun and you're not doing it, I still think you should do it. But what I'm saying is try to find ways to make it more fun. Gamify it. If a Fitbit worked for you because you find it fun, you get the dopamine response of like looking at it and the check marks and the bells and the whistles, like get a Fitbit.
Yep.
If you like the fact that like you look good in your Lululemon stuff or your Noble like new shoes, like go get those things. Like do things that like reward you along the way. You want to do everything you can. This is a good place to invest time, energy, money, resources, relationships to make this thing a part of your life. Make it as enjoyable as you possibly can, because almost nothing you do in life is going to have the same kind of benefit and payoff in the long run as you dialing in these 5 factors.
And because the enjoyment leads to consistency.
To so many different things, right? So people are like, I don't, it goes to that bigger question of like, what's your purpose? And people try so hard to find their purpose. Well, don't try to find your purpose. Do something that you're interested in. If you're interested in it, you probably enjoy doing it. If you enjoy doing it, you'll get better at it. If you get better at it, you may actually find your way on your path to mastery. You find your mastery, like, dude, there's your purpose. You're going to contribute to life because you become a master in this category. Well, it all kind of starts with like doing things you're interested in, and doing things you're interested in has to do with like things you enjoy. Like, make this enjoyable. If there's something you don't enjoy after this, if you don't enjoy going to running practice, don't go to running practice. Try swim. Like, if vice versa, there's so many different variables you can play with.
All right, my man. Those are 10 principles of training. That is the fifth of the 5 factors that we've broken down. If folks have not listened to the other ones, they are all there. And we will see everybody next week.
See you next week.
You can get every episode of Chasing Excellence wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Until next time, thank you for listening.